Hey there! Are you a crime scene investigator, law enforcement officer, or forensic scientist looking for a Facebook community that understands you? Check out Taction USA's forensic product groups. You'll find blogs, articles, information, and community. For those of us in the investigative field, there are not many lines of support out there, but Taction USA is a company that was founded by law enforcement for law enforcement. Subscribe today to get access to exclusive content. Just look for Taction USA in Facebook groups. Welcome back to Crossing the Tape, your favorite true crime podcast. As always, I'm Hillary.
And I'm Brendan.
Please sign the crime scene log and join us for part 2
of the misguided deeds of Mr. Flair.
Now, last time we told you about an arson case in Boston, quite a big one, and we haven't gotten into all the details yet, but so far we know that in the 80s, Massachusetts passed a law that kind of put a tax ceiling on communities and how much tax they could
I think it was
collect.
Mainly the property tax.
Yes, it was mainly property tax, but it put a cap so they could only accumulate so much, which, dips into the budget of public officials and employees and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So we found out that there were hundreds of police and firemen who were let go because the cities couldn't afford them.
Money wasn't there anymore.
And ironically, after that, all these fires started, and we already told you that, and we'll get into it more, but that a device called the La Bamba was used. And the last you heard was from Mr. Flair, as he sent a letter to a local Boston news station discussing the case, and he kind of gave away his identity in that, but we'll get into that.
Just a big hint.
Yeah.
So that letter said, I'm the Friday Firebug, and I will continue until all deactivated police and fire equipment is brought back.
So like a regular citizen, they might care that much, but would they care that much to go that far?
Yeah, we know by the end, over 200 fires. I think the best estimation, because, there were other fires in Boston at the time, of course.
Well, yeah, it's the city. Stuff happens.
And even other arson cases, but the best estimate of which ones Mr. Flair was responsible for, I think it was like 260, they guessed.
That's what I saw too.
So, now known to the public, at least his presence, not his identity, right. Mr. Flair carried on setting buildings on fire at breakneck pace, at times as many as 7 a night, with the blazes spanning from 2 to 4 alarm fires, potentially tying up dozens of firefighters and trucks at each scene.
I was thinking about this earlier, or when we, were doing research and everything. Mm-hmm. And in the first episode, we discussed, there were a lot of empty buildings and churches and things like that. Boston has a rich history. Mm-hmm. And I really hope that they didn't set on fire some of the really historical neat buildings. I mean, I think those would be a little more protected, but even the non-historical ones are really interesting.
Well, the focus was definitely abandoned stuff.
Yeah, but
they weren't trying to murder people. But,
but that doesn't mean it's not a neat place.
Right. The Museum of Natural History is vacant at night.
You're right.
So, yeah, it's mainly abandoned, but I'm sure there was some. Well, we do talk about figures as far as the value of the damage. And, oh boy.
Boston's a neat place. You'll see one day.
You, the listener, not me.
Yeah. Hey.
No, all right, me. So those fires would tie up dozens of firefighters and trucks at each scene, with police officers dispatched for traffic and crowd control as well. So thinning out those first responder ranks. Mm-hmm. We know from Mr. Flair's note the fires would continue until the reinstatement of all cops and firefighters who were laid off, which by this point, that reinstatement was underway thanks to legislation we mentioned last time. Mm-hmm. Luckily, the state of Massachusetts saw that this was creating a problem, so they diverted some state funds into Boston's public safety budget. Ironically, Mr. Flair's efforts to garner public demand for more first responders was also resulting in those same first responders becoming overworked and spread too thin, sometimes resulting in injuries. Between 1982 and 1984, around 300 firefighters were injured handling Mr. Flair's arsons, and a few were even permanently disabled, unable to ever return to work.
That's sad.
So that's the exact opposite of Mr. Flair's goal, if that really truly is the goal. On one occasion, an abandoned military barracks collapsed during a fire, injuring 22 firemen in one go when the roof collapsed on them.
Yikes.
And luckily, there were no fatalities, but still, hundreds injured.
Yeah.
And firefighters, too.
And
the
as
people
you said,
that they're trying to...
It defeats the purpose.
Yeah.
His surface purpose is
Right.
what I would say.
Yeah. Mr. Flair's actions were defeating the point of why he, or they, began setting these fires in the first place. In one instance, Mr. Flair even targeted the Massachusetts Fire Academy, perhaps an attempt to gather more sympathy for firefighters.
It's kind of dumb. The one place where all the firemen come from, let's target that.
Yeah. You don't get more soldiers by blowing up your own military bases.
No.
Idiots.
It's not a way to show support. I mean...
No, yeah, you better give us the money or we're going to shoot ourselves in the foot. The common source of the fire, the La Bamba, made it clear that these acts were terrorism, and authorities felt it was a bit of a game to these arsonists.
Well, yeah, sitting 7 in a night.
Yeah. Well,
By then, they're just having fun.
There's news footage from the time of talking to like fire captains and such that are like on the verge of a breakdown.
Yeah.
It's like we went to this one, put it out, and half the guys had to run to that one,
Well,
and then we
yeah,
had guys from neighboring cities having to come in and help because there was so much.
Yeah, and if it's the greater Boston area, like everything's relatively close, but if the fire got too big, I imagine somebody from another town would have to come help.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just like Boston Fire.
And, we all, if you work in law enforcement, you've probably worked around firefighters, and you know if a call comes over the radio for a house fire with, unknown if there's people still inside, they're not just sending 2 trucks.
No, they send the brigade.
Everybody's coming.
Yeah.
Everybody who's not...
Yeah.
Everyone who's within reach of that radio is coming.
Yeah.
So when you have, there's an apartment building on fire, just about everybody's going. And then when suddenly, there's the military barracks are on fire. Now a lumber yard.
Yeah. Well, a lumber yard would be scary.
Yeah. They're all having to divert and try to manage resources that ideally you want as many firemen as possible handling, a 4-alarm blaze, but some of them have to break off for other stuff. So they're all stretched way too thin, and it's like nonstop.
Right. Well, and I don't know that I saw anything, but did you see anything about, there were up to 7 a night, but do we know, were they consecutive nights, or did they space them out? I never found anything of like a pattern as far as time.
So the note said Friday Firebug. And
right.
I think initially it was,
Fridays.
Every Friday I'm going to set something on fire.
Right.
But then it grew.
It increased.
To basically having fun.
Yeah.
It seemed like it was most nights a week.
Okay.
That it was just all the time. Just as soon as the sun went down.
Right.
Something's getting burned.
Yeah. I kind of thought that, and of course Friday with the note. Yeah. But I never actually found anything that said... every other day or every 2 days or whatever. Or certain days, there wasn't a pattern of like, well, who is on duty when they're starting these.
Mm-hmm. So this case was by far the biggest in history as far as arson was concerned, and a major reason why Boston was known as the arson capital of the world during this era. Though the original motive pointed to disgruntlement, it was soon found that some of the fires may have been set for profit, while others may have just been a case of revenge, and we'll get to that later. Mm-hmm. The Boston Sparks Association was a fire club or a group of people, including some firefighters who were fascinated by fires and firefighting.
You know what they say about those people?
Firefighters?
No.
People fascinated by
Yeah.
fire? They're burning stuff?
Well, they have a tendency.
Well,
If someone says they're fascinated with fire, I'm like, I better watch you. Here's a fire extinguisher.
yeah. Well, and that would be my first inclination, too. I'm going to go down to the bar and have a drink with a few of the guys that really enjoy fires.
I mean,
what are you doing?
I guess
what
you
are
can't.
Really doing?
I guess you really can't say that it's it's not totally out of the ordinary, because there are like true crime groups. Mm-hmm. There's book club groups that love mysteries, and there's but as a former CSI and investigator, I don't have a club that we.
Right.
I have you. We discuss cases.
We discuss cases,
but there's not like a group like we're the crime broads. I can't say anything else. Broads.
Women
Stick
of
with
crime
broads.
is probably that's already been used. I'm sure.
I couldn't say what I was thinking.
But to be fair, the Boston Sparks Association was a fire club, which wasn't super uncommon at the time. They're kind of like storm chasers.
All right.
They're not necessarily hoping for a storm, but
if they find one,
find out, hey, there's possible tornado touching down wherever, they're gonna go and check it out. So these guys, some firemen, some not, were intrigued by fires, but not necessarily in the starting of fires.
All right.
So
fair enough.
We can't point fingers that if you're a person who thinks looking at pictures of a burning building is neat.
No.
You're not
I'm
necessarily
not
the
fingers.
guy.
I'm just saying, what's the difference with true crime stuff?
Right. And that means you, listener. Now, when one of these clubs, the Tapper Club, and we'll mention soon why we bring up the Boston Sparks Association. Mm-hmm. When one of these clubs, the Tapper Club, had its meeting place torched in the Mr. Flare style, it appeared that someone may have had a vendetta against the club. Perhaps someone who shared the fire fascination and wanted to be a member, but decided if you can't join them, burn them. Now, all hands were on deck, trying to track down and stop Mr. Flare. But for the 2-year period of the arson spree, the culprit was too skilled to be identified.
Another identifier, really.
Yeah. Yeah, the one guy who could get away with it, that's the guy you want to get.
I mean...
Of course, that makes it a little tricky.
It does, but it also might be an indicator.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's hard evidence when you do find the guy. Now, the biggest break in the case came in 1984 when a piece of news footage caught something peculiar. In the footage, several men standing at the scene of a structure fire appeared to be celebrating the flames as if they were a 4th of July display.
Ugh.
One man was seen brandishing a revolver and waving it about.
Well, that was smart.
Yeah. What are you doing? So you're already cheering for the fire, and then you start waving a gun. What are you doing? They were having too much fun.
I just have a picture of Moss on IT Crowd.
He had a ruddy gun.
Yeah.
Now, this bizarre display was brought to the attention of the arson task force, who were able to track the men down and identify him as Robert Grobluski, a Boston police officer.
Oh dear.
Yes. When he was interviewed at his home, he claimed to know nothing of the arson spree, and apparently he just really liked waving guns and watching fire. But he made the mistake of leaving something visible, which detectives took note of. Mr. Grobluski was in possession of a city firebox. Since 1852, and still in the present day, in fact, there was an article from 2018 about one of these fireboxes being used.
They're all over.
During a 911 outage.
Yeah, they're all over.
Boston has kept those fireboxes operational. So, 150 years now. Or more. They work kind of like a fire alarm in a building, which when they're pulled, it notifies the fire department dispatch so they can send engines to the location of the box. And from there, you should be able to pinpoint the fire.
Yeah, and they are, like, in the city. They're
just all over the place.
They're all over the place. You know what it reminds me of is, like, the police boxes they used to have in big cities.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's the same thing. But yeah, they're They're prevalent all around the city.
Bright red boxes.
Yeah.
So, having one of these boxes meant that Mr. Grobluski, or someone close to him, must have yanked it off its pole and stolen it. Mm-hmm. Possibly to hinder fire response time.
Right.
Because this was pre-cell phone, so you either had to run to a firebox or find someone who had a phone.
Yeah.
Grobluski was arrested for the possession of stolen property, and since that's all the authorities had on him at the time, after a bit more questioning once in custody, Officer Grobluski cracked, and he confessed, but his confession didn't close the case. It kind of blew it wide open and exposed the truth behind Mr. Flair. And you'll get the full scoop after this word from the National Investigative Training Academy.
If you are looking for a career change or to expand your knowledge in an already established one, look no further than the National Investigative Training Academy. The National Investigative Training Academy, or NITA, N-I-T-A, has well over 100 courses with 70 professional development ones alone. NITA is constantly adding to their course catalog, and courses are focused on private investigation and security fields. Whether you would like to become a private investigator or you need continuing education for your investigative or security career, the National Investigative Training Academy is for you. All courses offered are 100% online and do at your own pace. Once completed, you will receive a certificate in that course. Sign up today at investigativeacademy.com. Make sure when you sign up for your courses, you mention we sent you there. We encourage you to get the best investigative and security training possible today. When you sign up, mention our brand ambassador code, BA2367. That's BA2367, and you can find those courses at investigativeacademy.com. Look for links in our show notes as well.
Grobluski agreed to cooperate with the state. I'm not going to laugh at his name. And identified, thank you, 7 co-conspirators, 2 of whom were members of the Boston Sparks Association, one of those fire clubs we mentioned before when we told you it's important not to point fingers at people who are fascinated by fire.
All right.
But these 2 you can point fingers at.
See?
But only them. His cohorts were Donald Stackpole, not going to laugh at his name, a 28-year-old security business owner, Wayne Sandin, a 28-year-old housing authority lieutenant, Boston Housing Authority Police lieutenant, and Stackpole's business partner, Greg, I'm not sure if it's Bemis?
I think it's Bemis.
Bemis? Mr. Bemis, like the Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
A 23-year-old Boston Housing Authority Police sergeant, and the inventor of La Bamba, according to court documents. He was also a part-time security officer for Stackpole and Sandin.
Stackpole sounds like a town.
It probably is.
Well, there's Walpole, and,
Well, some of these fellas end up in Walpole.
I know. Hey, the town is nice, just not where they are.
The prison is to die for.
I wouldn't know that. But the town's nice.
Leonard Kendall, a 22-year-old Air Force firefighter. Ray Norton Jr., a 44-year-old Boston fireman. Joseph Gorman, a 27-year-old who worked at a manufacturing plant for aerospace defense. And Christopher Damon, no relation known to the people you're thinking of.
Did you look?
No.
I was going to look. I forgot.
Mr. Damon.
Sorry, I forgot.
A 27-year-old who worked for a healthcare company. So we get a good picture of the community here.
Yeah.
We got cops, firefighters, security goons, and some regular Joes.
Yeah.
It seems the arsonists shared the common goal of setting fires, but they didn't always see eye to eye otherwise. Donald Stackpole actually thought firemen were overpaid and underworked, so his motive was to harass them and make their lives more difficult.
Jeez.
A stark contrast to the Mr. Flair letter. He also burned down one of his security clients' businesses to divert suspicion from their company, just in case.
Oh, brother.
Yeah. He and Sandin profited from increased business as they offered arson patrols to their clients. So they're out setting fires, and meanwhile...
Hey, I'll watch your house.
For an extra kickback, we'll do a nice arson patrol, make sure there's no firebugs around. Stackpole and Bemis tried to become members of the Tapper Club, but when they were denied, they burned the clubhouse down out of spite. Yeah. Ray Norton never wanted to burn anything himself. What a saint. But he did act as something of a consultant, putting his 10 years of firefighting experience in Boston to bad use, recommending buildings to be burned as well as feeding intel to the other arsonists about what the arson task force was up to and what leads they had. Yeah, so he's also poisoning the investigation. Grabluski agreed to wear a wire on several occasions when meeting with the other members of the Mr. Flare crew, and that kind of sealed their fate because they talked pretty openly about everything they had done and were going to do. While the 8 Sparkies were busy having their sick fun, the fires were being looked at with great scrutiny by a team of experts. The 2-year-long investigation into the arsons was undertaken by the aforementioned Arson Task Force, which was comprised of ATF agents, the Suffolk County DA's office, Boston PD, and Boston firefighters. The physical evidence they found by the end included fire alarm boxes that had been disabled or stolen, like the one Grabluski had, half-charred incendiary devices matching the La Bamba, pictures taken from fires that they had set.
So like little trophies.
Yeah. Well, and remember, these were the guys in the news footage that were cheering at the fire before Grabluski decided he needed to point his gun at it.
His ready gun.
And of course, the materials for the infamous Mr. Flare note after Grabluski had flipped.
So they kept those? How come they didn't burn those?
You know? It's incredible.
Yeah, I'm going to take pictures.
The irony. You need a keepsake.
That's another level of criminal, but that's for another day.
Yes. In the end, all 8 men involved were arrested, and they were charged with setting 163 fires in and around Boston, as well as conspiracy, threatening witnesses, destruction of evidence, obstruction of justice, and perjury. So we mentioned there were around 260 fires that they were pretty sure were the
with those loans they
the
could
work
pin.
of these, but yeah, these were probably the ones where they found remnants of the La Bamba, which makes it pretty open and shut.
Well, and then I'm like, how are there remnants of that thing?
I know.
Unless
sounds like
it's the plastic bag.
Good.
But then the plastic bag, that doesn't really implicate anybody by itself.
Yeah, so there had to have been a little bit more. Or, they found charred scraps of a certain type of paper bag.
That's what I was wondering. Well, if they were
might
dumb
have found
enough...
extra bags at somebody's house.
If they were dumb enough to take pictures...
Yeah, they probably
then, to me, like you said, like they used the same type of paper.
The same Trader Joe's bag with the same print on it.
Right.
That kind of tied it up.
Yeah.
In the end, they were charged and arrested for setting 163 fires. And I mentioned all those other wild charges. And for those, Stackpole, Norton, and Bemis were held without bail because they were said to have threatened the life of the ATF agent in charge of the investigation. Well, apparently, while they were awaiting trial, there were, I believe, letters regarding taking care of that guy. Come on.
Oh, dear.
Fellas. A news article in 1984 stated their indictment was 83 counts.
That doesn't make first responders look great.
Well, no.
It's a bit sad coming from our background.
Especially when, at least for the police and firefighters involved in this crew, the end goal was, hey, give us more money.
I know.
This would make me want to take away what money they do have.
I know.
We got to teach them a lesson.
Yeah.
Convictions would have led to up to 735-year sentences for some, because of the mountains of charges they faced. Most of the guys were wise enough to take a plea deal for a smaller sentence, mainly just for pleading guilty to conspiracy. So do you want to go to trial and face forever in prison, plus another 650 years? Or do you want to take like a 6-year bid.
Right.
I think, what do they call that? Doing a nickel plus a penny?
Yeah. Something like that.
I think the lingo's changed.
Probably.
I've never been in.
Thank God.
Yeah.
Me neither.
Stackpole was fingered as the leader of the crew, and he received 40 years for his contribution after taking his case to trial. Shouldn't have done that.
Mm-mm.
While Norton also went to trial, and he received 6 years. So he got 6 years just for telling these guys, you should burn this and burn that, and look out, the arson guys they've got remnants of La Bamba. So when it was all said and done, the fires had caused $22 million worth of damage. And, compound that with all the man hours, all the overtime, everything. City was...
It totally defeats their purpose.
We don't have money for
their
firefighters.
Their quote-unquote purpose.
You better find it, because these guys are going to be working for free in a minute.
Yeah.
Thankfully, no one was killed, and unfortunately, the horribly misguided efforts to secure the jobs of many trusted and beloved police and firefighters resulted in a large portion of the public losing faith in their first responders.
Well, yeah.
It's hard to blame the public.
I know.
So, there's a case of a group of clowns making it worse for everyone else.
Yeah. Sounds like school, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. That one kid that makes it, he can't go to recess because that one kid...
Yeah, he wouldn't... put his cell phone away or whatever.
Hey, let's see. We didn't have cell phones half the time when I was in school.
He wouldn't put his firebox away. Yeah, the one kid that gets everybody...
Yeah.
Miss out on lunch or... No, oh, you asked about homework.
It's the same kind of thing.
Dude.
That one fireman. And cop.
During my first interview... with the first chief that I worked for, he said, there's going to be drama and nonsense left and right and political BS. Mm-hmm. Just keep your head down and do your job.
I think that's a good...
And for the love of God, don't set Boston on fire. And I never understood why he mentioned that. But now...
You got it.
Yeah, I think this is what he's talking about. It would have been so much easier... I mean, that sucks when the budget's cut and suddenly people are being laid off.
Especially first responders.
That's terrible.
They have a hard enough time as it is.
But luckily the state saw the writing on the wall.
Right.
Diverted some funds.
But they still...
to start reinstating everyone.
Yeah.
But even when that was going on, when that had already passed
I think they
and was
just,
started...
fired.
I think after the first few, they just wanted to see what they could do. And they ended up getting years in prison for it. And making everyone else look bad. They probably should have never started. Whoa. And if they were gonna stop after the 40 dumpster fires.
They shouldn't have done any of it.
Yeah. I would prefer nothing.
Well, yeah.
But if you've got to act like an idiot, keep it very small scale.
But that's the problem. When criminals get a taste of
foolishness.
Yeah, foolishness. Then they keep going and they think they're invincible, and that is always their demise. Mm-hmm. That is always where they trip up.
Yeah.
So don't do crime.
Please. And if you're a first responder,
you'll get caught.
Extra don't do crime. It makes it worse for everyone else.
Yeah.
But we thank you for joining us on a arson journey.
Yeah. Something
figurative,
different.
Not literal.
No.
And we hope you'll join us next time for, probably murder.
Probably.
Statistically.
We'll see what we come across. Yeah.
We'll find something new, but I bet someone dies.
Yeah. Usually our research leads us there.
Yeah. So, please join us next time for that.
Sign the crime scene log on your way out.
See you next time.
Stay safe.